Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to let um, more people join at the minute, so we'll give it 2 or 3 more minutes and then we'll get started. So do just grab yourself a cup of tea, coffee, or whatever you'd like to. We will be starting shortly, guys. We're just letting the last few people join. We'll begin at around 12:02, so a couple of minutes. Just grab yourself some tea, coffee. Make sure you can hear me clearly, and we'll just, wait for those to join. Last few people are just coming in now, so we'll start shortly, everyone. Just a couple more. I'll wait till there's 60 here, Clara, and then we'll go. There's 55 attendees currently. One more. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this ethics webinar hosted by us at the IFA. I'm Kyle Baker Kemp, the Professional Development and Advocacy Manager here at the IFA. Welcome to you all for this hour-long webinar. And we will get started. If you could change the slide, please, Clara. A little bit of housekeeping. Any technical issues, do put them on the chat and bear with us. They should resync, but we will look into each and every one for you. The Q&A chat box, which a few of you have used already, please ensure that your to message there is to everyone and not just to the hosts and panelists, so everyone can see your questions coming in and out. Please do ask as many questions as you'd like to. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So do just bear with us, but please do ask them. And as I said, please do address them to everyone on the little chat box. The webinar will be recorded and you will receive the recording and presentation slides within the next 24 hours. Next slide, please, Clara. Excuse me. Today's webinar will be hosted by Clara Robinson, who's our IFA Regulatory Case Manager. Clara is responsible for internal disciplinary referrals for non-compliance with the IFA's bylaws, regulations, and AML monitoring. So I will now pass hand over to Clara to start the webinar. And yes, as I said, any questions, please do put them in the chat and we will get back to you at the end of the presentation. Over to you, Clara.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kyle. So straight into it. The clock is ticking, everybody. I'm going to be presenting you with a quick dilemma, and I want you to give me your answers. We're going to be polling you for this, so you'll be able to click the poll. You're going to have 30 seconds on the clock to give your response. So, a runaway train is running away down the tracks, and it is in line to run over 5 people who are tied to the track. You are close enough to a switch which you can pull, and it will divert the train onto another track that only has 1 person tied to it. Essentially, the question is, do you pull the switch? Can we please launch that poll for us? So some additional context while you're thinking about your answer. You are not close enough to identify anyone who is tied up. You also don't have time to run over there and untie anyone. If you pull the switch, that 1 person will die. If you don't pull the switch, the 5 people will die. So this is the dilemma. I'm interested in seeing how you guys respond. You're going to have 30 seconds. We'll give you a couple more seconds on the clock, and I will share the overall responses. Just so you know, it's all anonymous, so I will not know who it is who's answered in a particular way. I'm still seeing a few answers come in. I want to give everyone the opportunity, so let's see. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So you should all be able to see the results of the poll there. What have we got? I'm seeing what everyone has chosen to kill him. That's quite sad, but it's not uncommon. It's about a 75% split of people deciding to pull the lever or to not pull the lever for this particular dilemma. So I'm not surprised by anyone's responses there. Let me give you this exact problem again, but let's change it up a little bit. And I'm interested to see how your answer would change. So let's have the exact same dilemma, runaway train, 5 people, 1 person. But in this scenario, you're actually close enough to figure out who they are. Now, the 5 people at the top, you don't know them, random members of the public. But you take a closer look at this guy on the bottom here, and you realize he's your favorite client. So if we can share the next poll, I'm interested to know, do you save the 5 people you don't know, or are you saving your client? Let's see what people think. Another 30 seconds. And again, please be honest. I won't know what you've answered to this one, so we'll see what you think. We've got about 10 more seconds on the clock. Let's see what people are saying. This is a classic dilemma. We've just put a little accountancy twist. Your favorite client, I imagine, is somebody, maybe they pay a lot of fees to your firm. Maybe they're the one client who gets everything in on time, right? That's what I'm picturing as your favorite client. Okay, so we've got a lot of responses in. I think I'm going to end the poll there. So if I share the results, interestingly, we've got closer to a 50-50 split. So before it was more, a lot more people said we'll take the 5, but now we've got quite a few people saying I'll save my favorite client, which doesn't surprise me. So a very interesting difference when we bring in someone we know. Obviously, or let's say hopefully, this isn't a scenario you're going to face in your everyday practice as an accountant. So it's just a little something to warm you up and get you thinking about dilemmas. So today's presentation, Balancing the Books, Ethical Decision Making, we're going to be covering a couple different topics on ethics. We're going to look at ethics basics, essentially our definitions and the relationships between similar concepts when it comes to ethics. Why good people do bad things, or essentially the sociology and psychology of ethical lapses. We're going to be reviewing the IESBA Code of Ethics and the fundamental ethical principles. This is the ethical code the IFA subscribes to. We're going to be looking at the ethics framework laid out by this and how to manage ethical dilemmas, essentially identifying, evaluating, and addressing ethical issues. And we're going to do 3 case studies. I'm going to be polling you again for these at the end, so you might want to keep a few notes throughout, and we're just going to see if everyone can identify the various fundamental principles at risk and what's threatening them. So let's get started. What do we mean when we're talking about ethics? It's important to define things to avoid any kind of misinterpretation. And essentially, ethics is simple. It is a system of accepted beliefs that control behavior. So in the case of accountants, it's beliefs accepted by accountants that control the behavior of accountants. So fairly simple in that sense. It can also refer to the study of ethics. So we are currently practicing or doing ethics right now, but generally we're talking about the systems of belief that are in place. Where people tend to get confused is when we start talking about the similar concepts or the differences between concepts like ethics, morality, and law. They're obviously equally important, and they are similar. They're similar in that they concern behavior. What is good, bad, right, wrong, behavior, action, potentially character traits. But where you find the difference between these concepts tends to be in the origins and in the applicability. So we spoke about ethics. Ethics is a system of accepted beliefs that control behavior. This tends to come from an identification with a group. So we talked about accountants, right? And accountants are a group. They identify with each other. They do similar stuff. It makes sense that they'd have a code. Same thing, you'll see codes of ethics for doctors, for dentists. It's similar when you talk about ethical codes in religions. You identify with that group. The rules come from within that group and they apply to that group. Morality is personal, right? So it can have social elements, but it's personal standards for right or wrong action. And law is rules usually set by some kind of authority. So you can have like divine law from religion, but generally we're talking about governments, and it governs and orders the way a society as a whole behaves. So if we can get the next poll up on the screen, the best way I find to discuss this is through examples. So would you steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving child? I'm interested to hear what people would do. Let's get a few answers. We'll give it 30 seconds again to see what people are thinking. Yeah, for examples is always the best way to do this. I'll tell you my answer. Personally, I would steal a loaf of starving bread to feed the loaf of bread to feed my starving child, sorry. I'm seeing quite a few answers in. I'll give you a few more seconds to respond. How interesting. So I'm just going to share the results with you now. Hopefully you can all see that, but we've got pretty much a 50-50 split, which is really interesting. It might not have passed your brain. This is a moral question, okay? You're not going to find ingrained in a code of ethics or a rule of law something that says, oh, it's okay to steal if this happens, right? This is a moral question because it's a personal thing, which is why we get this 50-50 split. People are torn. You're going to find, so I'll pop that in there as our bread in the moral. You're going to find some are going to fit quite neatly into all of these categories. So the one that comes up, murder, right? That's an easy one. Obviously, immoral, unethical, illegal, right? But there are some that are going to be maybe one, but definitely not the others. If I was to put forward something like slavery, slavery obviously used to be legal. It's not legal now, but it was legal, but totally immoral, totally unethical. So there is variety. It's also going to vary depending on where you are geographically, historically. There's a lot of differences, but the key thing is this is all about actions and rules that govern your actions. It's just that it differs slightly where it's coming from. So on to the sociology. Let me ask you this, and I'm not expecting any responses. Are you a good person? Are you a good accountant? I'm sure most people would say yes. Day to day, people make hundreds, if not millions, of small decisions out of habit that generally fall within society's expectations of good and bad behavior, right? And this is all influenced, again, by those concepts of morality, law, and ethics, right? And people do this without having an in-depth education on these topics. I mean, how many people here have law degrees? Very few. I still know how to follow the law, right? And this is because there's a social value to acting appropriately. When you act in a way that is socially acceptable, that's socially good, you are fit in, you have a good reputation, others like you, and psychologically it's important because you like yourself, right? These are all very important topics. And what this leads to is the perception that only bad people do bad things. But if we're being real with ourselves, how many people here have probably done something a bit naughty? A really common one that people hear of all the time: illegally downloading a movie. I think a lot of people have done this. Again, don't tell me if you have, but it's food for thought. Why is it there are some things that we know are immoral, unethical, illegal? And we know they are, but we will still do them, and we will still consider ourselves to be good people, even though we have done them maybe tons of times, right? Where does this come from? So one of the theories I'm going to put forward to you is our fraud triangle. This is a sociological theory. It's set forth by Donald Cressy. It's related to fraud and embezzlement, but it relates to ethical risk as well. And essentially, you need all three of these factors in place to enable somebody to do the wrong thing and still consider themselves to be doing the right thing. So on our left, we've got opportunity. Opportunity essentially is the how. And unfortunately, accountants are people with a lot of opportunity to do very bad things. If you think that accountants have access to a great deal of privileged information, it's important, it's complex, you're going to find that accountants are able to perform unethical, actions within their accountancy work and probably get away with it for some time, because people don't understand accountancy, right? That's why we have accountants. Our pressures, so this is our why, and this can be a whole range of things, from just monetary financial gain. So this could be just like bribery, it could be salary or KPIs, bonuses, all the way to being literally threatened to lose your job, or these sorts of things, or pressured to do so. So this is the why. And then once you've got those two in place, you need your rationalization. So this is essentially justifying undertaking this bad action. Can I do this and still consider myself to be doing the right thing? A really, really common one in accountancy, at least, for rationalizing is changing the language, and the idea of an ends justify a means, or there's so many ways you can rationalize something. A really common one actually is to say, okay, my bonus is based on metrics I can't attain. I deserve my bonus. I work really hard. I'm going to fudge the numbers to get this bonus. I deserve it. It's not my fault that the bonus is based on these metrics that are just wrong. So all these things, how do we avoid falling into this trap, right? This seems like a clear-cut trap. Luckily for us, we have our ethical guidelines. So the IESBA Code of Ethics, this sets out the guiding principles accountants should be acting by, the fundamental principles for accountants, and it reflects our need to act in the public interest, right? So in the interests of the wider public, not just our clients. And this is the set forth by IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants. The IFA is a full member of IFAC, and that means that these ethical guidelines that we follow are in line with accountancy bodies across the globe. But in the UK, ones like ICAEW, I think ACCA, CIMA, all of those following very similar, or if not the same, ethical guidelines. It's pretty difficult to tell you how to act in every single situation, right? But to keep it simple, these are the foundational, fundamental principles that should govern your actions day to day. And And if you apply these generally, you're going to be acting ethically as an accountant. I'm sure you're all familiar with these, but there will be some beginners in the audience, so I'm going to go through all of them. We've got integrity, professional competence and due care, professional behaviour, confidentiality and objectivity. You might want to make a note of these because I'll be polling you on these later. So let's talk about integrity. Fairly simple, be honest and straightforward, produce work that is correct and an accurate reflection of what you are doing. This is an honesty element. I mean, accountants are responsible for producing reports, information that is relied upon and can have major implications. Think about what could happen if you're withholding or omitting information from these. You also have to stand your ground against others. So this is a moral character element. Integrity is not just about being honest. You have to stand up to others. If you see something that you think is unethical, you can't be a bystander. If we think back to our runaway train situation, some people chose not to pull the lever, and some people say that they won't pull a lever because they feel to get involved makes them responsible. Well, you can't be a bystander. You have to get involved. Professional competence and due care, you guys, I'm going to give you some good news. You're already meeting this. So this is just to attain and maintain your knowledge and skill levels and to make others aware of your limits. If you are in a senior position, so if you're a senior accountant in business, or if you're a member in practice and you have employees, you are responsible for ensuring your employees are also well trained. But so far, everyone here is doing a great job because you're at the CPD session already. So that is excellent. Moving on to our next one. Professional behaviour. Bit of a catch-all, but common because it involves complying with the law, acting in the public interest, and avoiding conduct that discredits the profession. So consider any law relevant to accountants. On our end, I always think anti-money laundering legislation is the big one, but you have bribery laws, you have legislation around taxes. All of these, you have a duty to comply with them. Conduct that discredits the profession can be a little vague, but I just want you to think of anything you've ever seen in the news, any accountancy scandal. Don't do that. That's essentially the rule of it, right? So think of maybe like the Enron scandal, or the one that sticks in my head. It's not accountancy related, but right now there's the Titan submersible hearing. I don't know if you've seen the sub that imploded near the Titanic. These people who do a lot of submarining are saying everything stopped and rushed. The CEO did, discredits the profession as a whole. And that's exactly it. The actions of one can reflect on everyone else. So really take that into consideration. We've got objectivity, pretty simple, act with your professional judgment without being compromised by bias. Falling under this, some keynotes. Falling under this is your bribery and corruption laws. You want to be aware of the laws that are in your country around that. Obviously in the UK for ourselves, the Bribery Act of 2010 is the key one. It also not noted here, but important, don't be the person to put others under pressure, right? So it's not just about making sure you're not pressured. You can't be pressuring others to or trying to influence their objectivity in a situation. Move to the next one. Confidentiality, again, fairly self-explanatory, but there is an element of ensuring others respect confidentiality. You need to make sure that you're not inadvertently disclosing information or purposefully doing it, and ensure that any staff that you have are respecting the confidentiality of your clients. And that's essentially the 5 fundamental principles summarized. What you'll notice, and I want to draw your attention to, is that these form a strong foundation for excellence in accounting. You probably sat there and thought, oh, those seem really simple, because they are. These, if you do work that is correct, you protect people's privacy, your work is honest, you comply with the law, you have excellent skill levels, and you only do what you can do, you're producing high quality accountancy work, and that's just going to lead to success, to profit, compared to the potential fines and losses, loss of reputation from taking an unethical path. Another key thing I pointed out a little bit is all of these have an element of a responsibility for others. So you you can't just be yourself trying to follow these. You need to step in when you see others not following the guiding principles. You can't be a bystander in this situation. You do have a responsibility to watch out for this. So what do we do should we find that these principles are being challenged, right? It's all well and good to do that every single day, but you might come across a situation where you don't know what to do. Essentially, we're going to just quickly go over the ethics framework, which is set out in the IESBA Code of Ethics, which tells you what to do, what you should be doing, and the questions to ask. Now, it's challenging to say exactly what you should be doing because every single situation is unique, and that's really why we have a framework as opposed to an exact list of every single thing you should do at any one point, right? What we have on the screen, we've got our kind of the skills you need to be constantly employing in order to identify, evaluate, and address ethical dilemmas as they arise. So exercising your professional judgment, this links back to our competence and due care. You are the expert, right? You're all qualified accountants. You know when there's an issue, and you've got to be looking out for those. Remaining alert to new information, again, links back to competence. Things are ever changing. What might be ethical in one time might not be ethical a little bit later on when you look at it. So you need to be constantly reassessing a situation. Using the reasonable and informed third-party test, this is essentially just asking for a second opinion. It's good for diversity of thought, but it's especially good for objectivity. If you think you might be too close to a situation, or you just need another viewpoint, using a reasonable and informed third-party test is key. Now, we say reasonable and informed because this needs to be someone who is capable of taking on this dilemma, right? So it's not your wife. Well, I don't know, maybe your wife's an accountant, but assuming your wife's not an accountant, asking your wife, oh, what do you think about this situation, isn't necessarily going to be super helpful. So you want to look for somebody who has the ability to assess it as well as you can, or better. This could be a colleague or someone higher up in your firm. If you're a member in practice and it's just you, maybe you're a sole practitioner, you can contact the IFA and you can discuss it with us, pop it in an email. We're more than happy to discuss this issue with you and to offer that third-party perspective. A key note is there's no order to this. You want to be doing this all the time with every situation. It sounds complex, but these are things you could make a third nature. And you just want to do them whenever you spot something that you think is a little odd. So what is a threat? What is a threat to these fundamental principles that we've spoken about? This is by no means an exhaustive list, but these are some of the ones that are suggested by the IESBA Code of Ethics. Self-interest, self-review, advocacy, familiarity, and intimidation. Please make a note of these because we're going to come back to them for our case studies. So self-interest, I think, is a fairly self-explanatory one, but essentially this is any kind of interest you might have in a particular resolution or an unethical resolution, right? So for our members in practice, this would be something like a direct financial interest in the work you perform. I mean, you know, you are the one performing it for your clients. You do have a direct financial interest. For anyone in business, again, I've spoken a little bit about things like bonus schemes, right? You might have a financial interest in fudging the numbers if it means you're going to get your bonus. So that's a self-interest threat. Self-review, sometimes a little harder to spot, but essentially, if you're relying on a piece of work that you have completed or someone you trust has completed and you're not reviewing it appropriately, what you might find is you're not going to spot issues, or even that you have the opportunity to fudge numbers and no one else is looking at it. So that's a self-interest threat. Advocacy is essentially when you promote a position of a client to the point where it is affecting your objectivity. So be stuff like lobbying legislation on behalf of the client. Familiarity, probably a very easy one to know. I think everyone's seen this, and it's one we see a lot within the IFA. People you know, friends, family, even say clients that you have an excellent long-term rapport with. You can become too sympathetic to their needs. You can become too trusting on what they say, or you might struggle to stand your ground against them if a moral or an ethical dilemma appears involving them. Can you stand your ground against them? You know, if you're accounting for, say, your mum, that's where these issues come in, right? Intimidation is the last one. A keynote of an intimidation threat that people often don't notice is it doesn't have to be an actual threat, it can be perceived. So, you know, intimidation is easy to see if someone literally says, I will fire you if you don't do this. That's an intimidation threat. But you can just perceive an intimidation threat without there being one really present, and that can influence your behavior. So, consider something like you might be worried you'd lose your job if you don't do something, or you're worried you'll lose a client if you don't do something. They don't have to directly tell you, I'm going to quit, I'm going to leave, but it can be in the back of your head and it can influence your behavior. So, having identified one of these threats, let's say you do identify one of these threats in a given situation. What do? How do you evaluate it? You need to consider whether the threat will impair your ability to act in accordance with the fundamental principles. So it's going to vary based on every situation. You know, you're the expert again. You've got to employ these three: the professional judgment, third-party test. It's going to vary, but you can ask important questions and gather information to inform your decision making. You want to ask, what are the relevant facts? Who's involved? Who needs to be involved to make a decision? You know, a key one, is there a public interest element? Is something I'm going to do affect the wider public? What are the options available to me? It's just a little vague with this evaluating because it depends on what the threat is. But if you employ these and you ask questions, you can gather as much information as you can and assess whether it's going to impair your ability to act in accordance with the fundamental principles. Say you do say, do you know what, this is affecting my ability to act in accordance with the fundamental principles. What do you do then? You address the threat. Now, the great news is there's usually resources available to do this already, safeguards that you can put in place to address these threats. Now, if you are a sole practitioner, you're responsible probably for putting these in place. If you're a member in practice as well, you're probably a director, so you're going to find you're also responsible for that. But that is the great news, because it means you can address any situation that comes up. If you are an employed member, so you're a member in business, the company you work for should have policies and procedures in place that detail what you need to do, who you need to report to, should you find that there's an ethical dilemma that you need to report. Now, that is reliant on a compliance culture within the firm. So what do you do if you do find a problem and you find that there is no compliance culture within your firm? Ideally, there is. If there isn't, you might want to consider disengaging from a client, for example, or looking for alternative employment. Now, I know that sounds drastic, but this is for those drastic situations. And consider also your integrity is important compared to the possible fines you can get, the loss of reputation. You can lose your ability to practice as well. All of these are possibilities, and if you take the unethical route. So compared to that, having to lose a client for a short period of time or look for alternative employment it's nothing really. At least in my opinion, there's nothing to look for that. As with all of this, a really key element, and our AML reviewers will say it all the time, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Keep notes, address everything, keep it all recorded so you can refer back to it. It's helpful for training others as well. And then, if these things progress to a really drastic point, like needing to whistleblow, these kinds of things, you have it all written down and you can demonstrate what path and what action you've taken, what you've considered. So with all of that said, I think we can have a go at some case studies. I'm going to basically ask you, we're going to poll you to be identifying the fundamental principles at stake. So any of those 5 fundamental principles. And we're going to be polling you to identify possible threats to that from the 5 types of threats that we've discussed previously. So let's start with, in my opinion, the easiest one. which is our IFA information request. So we send these out constantly at the IFA, but you probably would only receive one of these every 3 years or so if you're a member in practice. If you're a member in business, you might not be aware of what this is, but please have a go anyway. You might be able to identify them. So Jessica is an IFA member in practice with a PC and AML supervision. She has 3 employees and she's the money laundering reporting officer for her firm, A-Star Accountants. One day, Jessica received an email from one of the IFA's AML reviewers asking her to arrange a date for an AML review. The email also requests she sends various documents to the reviewer, such as her firm-wide risk assessment, evidence of relevant training, and several copies of CDD, client due diligence. What are the fundamental principles Jessica needs to consider? Can we get the poll on the screen, please? So I just want you to have a think, are any of these fundamental principles relevant right now? I'm going to give you 1 minute to respond. Now, I realize there's no direct ethical breach currently. However, we need to be applying ethics at all times. If you apply it before there's a breach, you're going to find that you have a lot more success in practicing ethically. It's easier to prevent than to resolve, right? So I'll give you guys 1 minute so you can have a proper read through this. Again, you'll probably find it easier if you are a member in practice. Let's see what people have to say. This is really good. I'm seeing a lot of responses, guys. Okay, brilliant. We've got a couple more seconds to get a few more people. Fantastic. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, I'm going to end the poll there. And I will share the results. So you guys have done a really good job. I've seen a lot of people identifying these. I can definitely see people identifying all the key stuff. I've picked out these 4. So 70% of people said integrity. Fantastic. So, you know, Jessica has a responsibility to provide information that is accurate and doesn't obscure or omit details. If she wasn't compliant with AML, she might be tempted to, you know, fudge the numbers to make it look like she is, but she should be providing clear documents that enable the reviewer to get a accurate understanding of her AML compliance. Great job there. Confidentiality, we've got 43% of people said confidentiality. That is a really good one. It's a little bit more subtle. She has an ethical and legal obligation to maintain her client confidentiality. We've requested client due diligence. Now, there is pathways under the money laundering regulations for her to be providing us that information. That is okay, but it's good that you're cautious to be aware of the need to maintain confidentiality in this situation. And she should be sending this in an appropriate format to ensure that privacy is maintained. We've got professional competence and due care. Excellent. We've got 63% of people said that. It's a key one. I mean, she has to comply with the law. AML regulations, they're a legislational requirement. She has to provide us these documents if we request them. Excellent. We've got professional behavior. So, oh, that's the law one, sorry. Professional behavior is the law. It's professional competence and due care is ensuring records are up to date. A few people have selected objectivity. I mean, there is some objectivity stuff underlying this, but it's not a super relevant one in this particular case because she's not going to be pressured by anyone other than maybe herself. So what she should do, how would she address this situation? She should review her work, ensure it's an accurate representation of her AML compliance, and send it over in the appropriate manner. So great job, everyone, on this one. Let's move on to the second one. So this one's a little bit more complicated. This is Bethany's dilemma. So our scenario, Bethany is an IFA member in business, so she's employed by a small accounting firm. She's the lead accountant for a variety of tech businesses. One of her long-term clients, Cellotech, she's developed a good relationship with the CFO, John, who she socializes with outside of work, even attending his wedding. Cellotech is the largest firm and the most high profile within the accountancy firm she works for. She's also up for a promotion, and her performance with this account will play a crucial role in the decision. Our situation. Bethany's role involves reviewing and preparing the financial statements for Celotex. Celotex frequently acquires smaller tech companies, and John asks Bethany to consolidate the financial statement of the newly acquired subsidiary with Celotex. Bethany notices a number of serious inconsistencies in the financials provided by the subsidiary, which she flags. To her surprise, John suggests she uses the consolidation process as an opportunity to smooth over any discrepancies she might find and not mention them to anyone else. So, I mean, there's a little bit of naughty behavior in there. Let's see if anyone can identify. Let's start with, if we can get the poll launch, please. Can you identify the fundamental principles at risk in this scenario? So I'll give you a minute so you can read through it again a little bit, but any of the fundamental principles: integrity, confidentiality, due care, objectivity, professional behavior. I'll give you a full minute just to consider it. Fantastic. I can see we're getting a lot of responses in. This is looking really good, guys. I'm going to give you maybe 15 more seconds to get your responses in. It's looking really good. I'm still getting responses in, so I'm going to give you a few more seconds because I can see people are still thinking through. Okay, responses are slowing down, so I will end our poll. Let me share those with you. So I'm actually not surprised by this split that we've got in, but great job, everyone, because I have also identified that all of the fundamental principles are at risk in this scenario. So to skip over and skip down to confidentiality, where only 21% of people said we needed it, that doesn't surprise me because this is a little bit more indirect, right? It's not quite clear, but remember, in any scenario, and in this scenario, Bethany is obliged to protect sensitive data. Where she might be discussing the matter with some higher ups within her firm, if the result isn't ideal, she might want to talk to external parties. And if you're talking to external parties, you need to be cautious to protect sensitive data. Obviously, we've got integrity. Producing this work would be purposefully admitting this information. So, that challenges integrity. And Bethany might have to stand up against John, who is a friend almost in this situation. They're very good. They've got a good rapport. Will she be able to do it? Objectivity, coming back to that, close relationship with the CFO. Is that going to influence her ability to exercise her professional judgment? Some of you probably also noticed that she had a promotion coming up. So is that going to be impacting her ability to exercise a professional judgment? Professional behavior, would undertaking this smoothing over work mean she's breaking the law? Probably. Would she want this to go to the news? Would the news be happy to hear that she's, smoothing over discrepancies? Probably not. It's not a good look for accountancy as a whole. Professional competence and due care. I mean, Bethany has a duty to apply her expertise to a situation. She's already doing it in noticing these inconsistencies, but to do this consolidation and smooth over these, it's not a good application of her skills, right? So great job, everyone, on this one. Now let's add another element. So going back to the same scenario, I want you to think back to those threats to compliance. Can you identify what threats are present? There's already hints in there, but I want to see if you can identify those threats. So can we get the next poll up for this one, please? So is there a self-interest threat, self-review, advocacy, intimidation, familiarity? Can you identify any of these threats? You probably identified them already when you were looking at the fundamental principles at risk, but do give me your thoughts. I'll give you a full minute for this again, and we'll see if everyone can identify them. It's looking good so far, guys. I'm getting a lot of responses in. This is looking really, really good. Gonna give about 10 more seconds for everyone to get their answers in. It's looking really, really good. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll there. So let me share those results with you. Again, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you. Self-interest is the big one. Self-interest is always the big one. But in this case, there's two major self-interest threats that I spotted. Bethany is up for a promotion, and her performance with this account, is a significant player for this. Any fallout from this situation could jeopardize her career, could lose her money. So that's a huge self-interest threat right there. Self-review, fewer people selected this one. Doesn't surprise me. It was a little bit subtle in there. I did just slip in there that Bethany is responsible for preparing and reviewing Celotex financials. So no one else is reviewing her work. It means the opportunity is there, but also, it means no one else might notice if she did do what John requested. We've got familiarity. Everyone's picked that one out as well. That's really good news. John, as she's developed a good rapport with John, maybe not friends or family, but she's gone to the wedding. Is she going to be able to stand up to him? I've also got intimidation. So this one's a little bit harder to spot. We talked about indirect or perceived intimidation. When it comes to her promotion and her place within the firm, she could have fears about bringing this up. So great job on identifying all of those. What do you do in this situation? Of course, you would bring this up to a third party, as well as maybe someone within the firm. So she's only an employee in this situation, which means that not necessarily all the responsibility for resolving this is going to lie with her. The colleagues or the director within this firm would be ideally the person to bring this up to. We also, well, I would assume that there's a compliance culture within this firm. And if there is a compliance culture, we can assume that you would be praised for bringing this forward. It doesn't jeopardize a promotion, and a good director would realize that there is a high value in protecting the reputation of the firm. So that's what I would do, at least if I was Bethany in this situation. Let's move on to our third and final case study, making tax digital. Now, before anyone says it, I know that the VAT registered stuff has already been switched over and it's only income tax and self-assessment, but let's imagine it hasn't yet. So case study 3, making tax digital. Here's the scenario. You are a sole practitioner running your firm, HD Tax and Financial Services. You have around 35 clients, all primarily small businesses like yourself. They value your services. You have a good rapport with most of them, even receiving small gifts on holidays from some. So a nice Christmas present on occasion. The UK government is in the process of implementing the Making Tax Digital initiative, which will require your clients to acquire Making Tax Digital compatible accountancy software if they don't have it already. Most of your clients are struggling with making tax digital, all being small businesses with strict budgets. Many are stuck in their ways and don't want to make the necessary changes to their bookkeeping. So here's our situation. One of your oldest clients, Vino Ristorante, is a small family-style Italian-style family-owned restaurant. They're particularly resistant to making tax digital. They actually still provide you their account records in a double entry paper ledger. So they're physically handing it to you. They're not on QuickBooks or anything. They're not on Xerox, so they're not online. Ben, the owner, contacts you privately with a request. Help them find a workaround so that they don't have to adopt it. Additionally, after he approaches you with this request, Ben offers you a gift of a case of expensive Barolo wine. So can anyone identify the fundamental principles at risk in this scenario? Can we get the poll on the screen, please? Lovely, that poll is up. I'll give you a minute because this is a bit of a longer one to follow through. So let's see what people say. Lovely, we're getting a lot of responses in. Fantastic. Okay, about 10 more seconds, guys. Have a think of this. Really, really good responses we're getting in. I'm going to call it there. We've got most people in. So let me just share the results. This will not surprise you. It doesn't surprise me. I've identified integrity, professional competence and due care, objectivities, and professional behavior. Professional behavior, easy, complying with the law. I mean, making tax digital, you have to do it. There's no workaround. You have to do it. And not doing this is, yeah, it's not going to work. We'll also note potentially in professional behavior, the free gift of Barolo wine. Can you accept that? Is it, are there laws relating to accepting gifts and hospitality? We'll touch a bit on it later. Integrity, an obvious way. The only way to circumvent it is to not do it. It's not producing accurate work if you were doing that. Professional competence and due care. If you assist with this request, it wouldn't be a good application of your skills. It can't be done. Objectivity, obviously, long-term client, and I don't know about you guys. A nice crate of Barolo wine might sway anyone's objectivity, right? So excellent job on everyone identifying those. Confidentiality has also been pointed out. And I tell you what, I'll give you that, because if you wanted to discuss this with a third party, bearing in mind you're a sole practitioner, you'd be discussing with a third party, potentially the IFA. So you've got to be careful about what personal information you share in that situation. Really, really good. So same again, I'm going to ask you to look at the same scenario and tell me threats. What are the threats to compliance? Again, this one you probably already had to think through. Can we get the poll on the screen? Self-interest, familiarity, intimidation. What threats are present in this scenario? Can we get some answers to this poll? Brilliant. Everyone's already in there. I think some of these are pretty obvious. I'll give you a minute to respond to that one. Fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of responses. Brilliant. About 10 more seconds, guys. 10 more seconds to get your responses in for this. It's looking really good so far. Fantastic. Right, I'm going to end the poll just there. I will share those results with you guys. So everyone selected a few, all of them, a little bit of every single one of them. I've picked out these three. The most common one, which I think everyone's pretty much got, is a self-interest threat, right? A nice Barolo wine. And the pressure to do the work, but the Barolo wine, this is a self-interest threat. If you like a nice case of Barolo, you might be swayed. There is something to gain by potentially the Barolo. So the other two we've got in here is familiarity and intimidation. We already said Ben's a long-term client. You have a great rapport with him. Intimidation is an indirect one in this scenario. Intimidation is potentially, you know, if you lose a client and you've only got 35 clients, is this going to cause you any kind of difficulties? Are you worried about him leaving a bad Google review for you? So these are all the things that could go on. And I think we have a little bit of time. I'll quickly touch on addressing the threats. So if we could get the last poll on the screen, please. Can you accept this wine? Can you accept the Barolo wine? I'll give you 30 seconds. Again, it's anonymous, so you can be honest, but can you accept the wine? See what everyone has to say. Interesting. Yeah, I can see a few people are tempted by a nice case of Barolo wine. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be? Fantastic. I'm going to end the poll there. So most people have said no, a few people have said yes. I appreciate your honesty. In this situation, you should consider a gift like this in the context, right? You know, I already said you receive small gifts around the holidays from some of your clients. This is appropriate. There are cultural norms to gift giving. Modest gifts at appropriate times are okay. But a gift like this and the timing is suspicious, and I would recommend rejecting it. You know, the expense and the timing. So the expense, it's an expensive gift compared to, say, one bottle of wine at Christmas, a case of Barolo wine, a nice Barolo wine. It's quite a lot more. And the timing is right after he's made this request. Is it bribery? Bribery, you know, gifts and hospitality aren't automatically bribery, and it can depend on the legislation. Obviously, we have the Bribery Act 2010 here. But it's only considered bribery when it's intended to improperly influence your actions. Although this might not quite hit it, it could be perceived as improper behavior, so I would recommend rejecting the wine. But that is everything, guys. We managed to get through all of the case studies today, which is really, really good. I'm really, really pleased with the engagement. Everyone's had some really good thoughts and picked out all the fundamental principles. So I'm really excited about that. Kyle, can I pass back to you on thoughts of what, you know, the follow-up and what we might be doing next?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Clara, for that. That was brilliant. We are open to a couple of questions. We've only got 5 minutes left, guys, so do send those in. If not, I have a couple a couple of juicy ones that you may all be interested in regards to the common issues that we have from our membership base. But I thought I'd just run you through a couple of things before you leave us. Our next step in our ethics CPD learning, we have some online CPD short courses at the moment. What's key to these free modules is that you can claim up to 18 hours of verifiable CPD by working your way through at your own pace and own time these free modules. The price of this is just under £100, £99, and you can claim, as I just said, 18 hours of CPD. And with the year-end CPD hours coming up, it may be a one-stop shop to gain the hours that you still require. So just an FYI for you there. All links for this will be on the presentation and the email that you'll receive shortly. What else do we have CPD-wise coming up? Next slide, please. A variety of stuff. Lots of face-to-face regional branch meetings that you can see there. A couple of software updates that we've seen requests from and demand from the membership base. So do keep your eyes out for those. There's a London regional event there. There's also our first ever international conference on the 7th of November. So do feel free to sign up to that as well. That will be highlighted. Questions wise, we haven't received any. Just a lot of thanks to you, Clara, for the brilliant presentation, which I'd like to echo. You're fantastic. You've made sometimes which can be a dull topic in regards to ethics quite entertaining, and the interaction on the polls has been brilliant. So I'd like to thank you for that. I mentioned the juicy question that may keep, which a lot of us will be interested in the room. So I'll ask you this one. Some of the common ethical breaches that we get at the IFA, or you get from members, what are those?
The juicy ones, yeah. So these ones, be cautious of these. This is what I would say we see most often, at least I see, professional behavior. So we tend to get cases where people haven't complied with the law, and professional behavior requires you to comply with the law. So that is a really common one, especially for us with our anti-money laundering supervisory responsibilities. We often see professional behavior and AML breaches hand in hand. Another one that we frequently see is dishonesty allegations related to the fundamental principle of integrity. So common, for example, in member returns, people will have had, say, adverse action from other regulators or HMRC, something like this, and they don't declare it to us knowing that this is going on. So those are the two big juicy ones that we see most commonly in the IFA, is your integrity and your professional behavior.
I thought the members would enjoy that one.
Yeah.
Yes, so thank you very much, and it's a goodbye from us, guys. Please do look out for our regional events coming up. Our upcoming MAC meeting, where you can meet all of our regional ambassadors on the 24th of October. We are looking for volunteers to look after some of our regional branches. Please do look out for that. As I said, the international conference on the 7th of November, and a variety of regional branch meetings are coming up as well. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And please do fill in the feedback form when you receive it. It will be great. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys.